Hello and welcome back to Radio Free Urbanism. This is a podcast about urbanism and stuff. I am your host, Alex Williams, and today I'm joined by two delightfully wonderful gentlemen. Let's eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's go Ethan first. Ethan Myers, say hi.
Welcome back, you beautiful people. We have a wonderfully exciting show for you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, actually, thanks for especially the 4 people in the live audience right now already tuned in and watching the show. If you guys want to sound off in the comments so we know who's all here and we can say hi to each of y'all. And, of course, we also have Nick Laporte. My goodness.
I thought you were going to forget about me. Just be like, you know what? You talked enough last week, Nick. You're out of this show.
You're done.
Do you know what? I realized I'm the problem on this show. I'm the problem because when I was editing the show last week, I was like, take me out of the equation, and suddenly it's pretty equal. Like you guys all took your turn speaking, but whenever I'm on the show, it's the Alex show, and Ethan talks, and Nick is just there, and
I'm just here.
He's just chilling.
He's just here, but
I'm here to complain.
Yeah, and you know what? We will have a fair bit of complaints, but I'll give shout outs to our friends in the chat here. We've got Austin, Jen, and Skitch saying hi in the chat, and one other person who hasn't said anything. If you want to join this chat, by the way, you can go to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism and sign up to be a patron of the show. And for as little as $1 a month, you can do that. And then you get to catch the live shows along with these fine folks here. But with that, don't worry, Austin. I know I saw your other comment in the chat. We will address that momentarily. But first, Nick's got an update for us.
I have an update, and it's just me bitching about something because once in a while you got to get into it. And let me tell you, we got to what grinds my gears later on in the show. But after having Patty on the show last week, the bicycle mayor of Winnipeg, she was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
I bought some stickers from her website, pattybikes.com. You can get those, pattybikes.com, plus my death. She got me fired up. She had that dash on spirit, like she said, the Brazilian queen of the north. And I started, getting emboldened and getting into little spats on threads and Reddit and stuff, and I gotta say, I gotta take a break. I'm not gonna go into the details about the arguments and disagreements I had with people, but it was just a highlight of how complicated these topics are and how you can't really get away with having a fruitful conversation on social media, or at least it's very difficult with the limited amount of space we have in places like Twitter, Threads, Reddit, wherever you talk to people or argue with people in my case. So I don't know what I wanted to get out of this other than I'm taking a break. I'm going to do the post and ghost thing. I'm not getting into it with people because it's not worth it for my health, my mental health. It's too stressful.
Yeah, that's real.
It's always better to chat with people in person, right? To actually be able to communicate one-on-one with other human beings. And maybe like when you have those conversations, they see you as a person, right? Rather than just, another avatar on the internet.
Yeah.
And so I always find the most effective conversations are had face-to-face, in person, and usually when you do that, even with people who completely disagree with you, you can often get into a pretty decent conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way. And it gives you an opportunity to actually listen. And there's just so much syntax that's lost in text, right? It can often just seem aggressive when it's not at all. And somebody might appear that they might think you're doing that when honestly you're just trying to be super chill and have a fruitful conversation. It's really difficult. But I've got some other crappy news today. But before that, I got something a little fun, a little bit of excitement. And not excitement, but just interesting, I thought. And I learned today that I walk quite a bit. I walk so much that I travel the equivalent of going to Mordor from the Shire every 6 months. And in fact, it's so consistent with the distance that Frodo and Sam traveled that it's within 100 meters of how their average every day. I do in a year about 11.1 kilometers a day, and they did 11.2 a day. And I was just like, how close that was to their speed of travel. And I thought that makes walking around feel a little better. I think to think about these imaginary characters who, literally went to hell, and I get to enjoy things that are a little less hellish.
Yeah, but you know what?
Yeah.
I see some adventures in your future.
We'll see.
Yeah. I think maybe someday you might end up as a Gandalf figure, and you'll be preaching urbanism. You'll be hanging out in Stanley Park with a wizard hat, telling people about the glories of urbanism.
Well, if I can turn cars into stone, I'm totally willing to take that title.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a pretty cool superpower.
But Jen says, what app tells you that? I don't know. Actually saw it as an ad, but I didn't click into it. But I was just curious, so kind of researched how far. But I think there's an app that can track your steps or whatever, and you can get like benefits or prizes for walking certain distances or something. But yeah. Anyway,
I know Fitbit does that. Like Fitbit will say, "Oh, you've walked this distance," which is equivalent to around planet Earth or whatever, right? A marathon in one day or whatever. I know Fitbit does all of that stuff. There's probably a lot of them because that's like the fun way to track that stuff. Who cares? Like 10,000 steps? I don't know what that means. But you tell me that I walk the same distance as Sam and Frodo. Like, okay, now I'm interested. Now I'm gonna move my feet a little bit. But we're going back to sadness here. I've got a little update. I've talked about the Green Line so many times on the show. I've shared a lot of optimism about the Green Line so many times on the show. But yesterday, Calgary City Council voted to wind down the project because they can no longer afford that. They can't do it themselves, and the province suspended the funding or removed the funding on September 3rd in a letter that was shocking to everybody. And I've heard even shocking to the people who work at like the Alberta Transport Ministry and stuff. This was a surprise. And unfortunately, this wind down means that the city of Calgary spent $1.3 billion already preparing the way for this new LRT line. And it'll cost about $850 million to unwind it or wind it down because of contracts that have to be paid out and probably some litigation issues in there and a whole ton of issues. Interestingly, the transportation minister, Devin Dreeshen, is claiming that the funding was not removed, but reading the letter, it seems obvious that that's what the deal was that the provincial funds would be withdrawn if the city wanted to go ahead with this plan. But the city has done study after study, spent over a decade on these studies. The original study was done in the 80s. Like, this is a long time coming. And I'll also say, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on as well, the city does a lot of engagement. The city communicates with citizens a lot on, hey, what do you think of this project? What do you want from this project? And that is fantastic. I think that's one of the benefits of local government. The provincial governments in Canada and the federal government of Canada don't typically do those sorts of engagements. They just kind of walk on and say, like, well, this is what we're doing, which I think can have its benefit because they can, go ahead and make plans, whereas municipal governments can often get caught up in some bureaucracy issues. But this was a very in-depth, studied, well thought out plan that we were getting ahead with, and it's dead. And we're going to see the Alberta government is going to come out with some new drawings for what their plan is. They say by December, and so we'll see how it shakes out. But very, very disappointing. I didn't want to do this as a main story because I feel like I've talked about it to death, both here and we had a rally on Monday at City Hall. So I just wanted to bring that up. I will highlight Austin. Austin made a comment earlier saying Alberta can't afford a $1.5 billion transit investment, but can afford giving millions to charter schools as part of its $8.6 billion school investment. I wonder if the province has taken funding away from the Green Line to fund education. I don't think that's the case. These are two separate pots. The province is still planning to fund an LRT that will go to Southeast Calgary, and it better go to North Central Calgary as well. So I don't think that the schools funding that was announced last night by the provincial government, by Premier Smith, has anything to do with the Green Line, other than the announcement happening on that day in order to try and take up some of the airwaves from what the city has been dealing with the Green Line. That's the way that I see it. The money is not the same money. It's the timing of it is just about being able to fill the airspace. So that's my thing on the Green Line. That's my little update.
It's so disheartening. So they're just burning millions and almost $1 billion just to wind this down. Is that right? $850 million to stop.
Yeah,
it,
well,
basically.
there were so many contracts filled for this specific project.
Yeah. There
There was also with the federal government funding that we had. That I think there's something about it. I'm not sure what the legal term is, but it comes up in March. And so basically, if this project wasn't underway by March, and the federal government specifically gave funding for this Green Line that the city had created and designed, then that funding is gone as well. So it's just this big snowball that the province did, and I don't think, and this is me speculating, I don't think that Minister Dreeshen realized the consequences of this letter when he sent it. Like, I don't think he fully thought through what was being said in that letter. But it's a political game, because the UCP government, their political opponent is Naheed Nenshi, who's the leader of the official opposition in Alberta as the leader of the Alberta NDP party. And he was the mayor of Calgary when the Green Line really started kind of get rolling, when all this engagement was happening, when things were starting to move forward with it. And so it's in their political interest for the Green Line project to kind of look mismanaged by the city. Unfortunately for them, it's being mismanaged by them. It's being mismanaged by the province. And we can talk about a long list of things that the city has or has not done over the past 40 years with this project and with the rest of our transit building projects. But this final blow, this is on the province for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really disheartening to hear about any sort of transit project really kind of getting, in this case, technically shoved to the side, but in all honesty, it sounds like it's not going to get ramped up without some serious blowback.
Yeah. I think we will get a train of some sort. We'll see what that ends up looking like. We'll see how the alignment might change. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And I will be shocked. I will be shocked if this ends up saving any money at all, because of the money already spent for the alignment that the city had spent a decade planning out, and the money already spent preparing that right of way. I will be absolutely shocked if this saves any money, not to mention all of the litigation issues that I'm sure are going to come up because of these disappointed contracts. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. It's bad for business, and it's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing that the provincial government did this.
Yeah, like best case scenario, what comes out of this is that they somehow get it back on track, and it's as good as it would have been, but you're going to spend way more money in the end.
Yeah.
Like that's the best case scenario.
A lot of
Yeah.
it does come down to contracting basically every part of the design process to it, but I mean, like, that's really your flaw when you contract out stuff like this, is that you have to deal with so many outside entities that even if you want to, say, even in a best case scenario where you're looking to just restructure a plan, it's going to
Yeah.
cost you tens of millions of dollars just to do that, because
Yeah.
you have to deal with so many different outside contracts.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's thousands of Calgarians employed on this project, right? Like, and their jobs are gone. You know, very, very disappointing, very frustrating, and frankly, a bad political move, like a really, really poor political move. They could have funded the rest of the project. They could have gotten it further south for us, and looked like the heroes and said, we're going to come in and fix this project. But instead, they decided to kibosh it and do their own thing, which, once again, I will be shocked if it saves us a single penny. But alas, yeah, that's my super ultra depressing news. Let's move on to the news stories here, Ethan.
Exactly. Now it's time to bring the mood back up, because we actually have some really, really exciting news out of California. So I'm sure you two know that housing is an issue, and especially in a state like California, where I believe the average rent for any apartment is over $2,000 a month. That's over a one bed. But Los Angeles is really one of the hearts of where the housing crisis is pretty awful in North America. But there's actually a pretty big project that's going on that's planning to actually address some of this. So this comes to us out of the neighborhood. I'm trying to actually remember which neighborhood it's out of, but it's on the west side of Los Angeles, not too far away from Santa Monica. But the plan is to have a new mixed-use development of over 800 apartments on top of a brand new Costco. Now, this was required by the city and the jurisdiction that it was in, that they had to provide housing on top of this development. So this went from being a pretty standard Costco design, which, if you guys haven't been to Costco, it's a giant warehouse bulk order store that kind of isn't very thought of as being, mixed use. It's a very car-centric design when it comes down to it for most of their locations. But having this mixed-use design is really kind of shaking things up on what a lot of people think a Costco is anyways. But Skitch just commented in our live chat, Costco-oriented development. But yeah, it kind of is, and I can imagine a lot of people are going to see the benefits of living above essentially a wholesaling grocery store. On top of this, too, it's right near a 15-minute bus line service, and it's about half a mile away from the Expo line in the LA Metro system. So it's pretty well oriented around transit. Now, the development is going to have parking both for customers and for residents on site. With over 800 residents, though, I don't believe it has that much. There hasn't actually been a number announced for how many units or how many spots are going to be for residents or for the actual commercial side. But 200 of these units in this development are going to be designated as affordable housing. So it's going to have about 600 market rate units and about 200 low income or affordable housing units. So really kind of addressing both sides there, adding a bunch of new units, dealing with the commercial demand in the region as well too, and on top of that, offering some affordability when it comes to housing, along with transit access. But it's really nice to see these kinds of projects, especially in California, a state that really has kind of quashed a lot of housing projects throughout it, and has really suffered the consequences of it.
This is wild. Like, the rendering looks really cool. Like, at first when you said it, I was like, okay, think about a Costco with like the corrugated steel on the outside and just make it really tall. Like, that's what came to my mind. But at least the rendering looks nice. Who knows what it's going to look like? So where's this? South LA?
So it's in West LA.
West LA. Okay. Yeah. This is fantastic. I mean, why not? Why not use the space to make it more efficient? This is like the thing we talk about when we talk about malls, right? So many places that we have across the continent, you have these massive parking lots surrounding a mall that are just sitting empty. And I feel like this could be a much better use of that space. where not only you have this Costco, but who knows, we might have other space for other retailers that are needed in the area as well.
Yeah, yeah, and Skitch says in the live chat, I live on a block adjacent to a grocery store and 2 transit stations, and it's amazing. Smiley face. Yeah, that is fantastic. I wonder, do you think they'll get free Costco memberships with their apartment?
If I was a resident, I would try and negotiate that in, but we'll just have to see if they're going to do that or not. We'll also see if they charge for parking. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they try and, reduce the amount of people that actually do drive here. These renderings don't really show a whole lot of parking on site anyways. Maybe it's underground, but, these types of developments are where just everybody wins in general. We get new commercial spaces for businesses. We get new residential housing for people that need housing. We reduce our car dependency. Even though this has parking, it's still got that transit access both to buses and a light rail. And on top of this, it's just overall much more aesthetically pleasing than your standard Costco that you would see sitting out here. This just looks way more inviting to the people of Southern California, and I'm really excited to see a project like this pop up.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. And this is kind of, being able to access things so comfortably and easily is fantastic. Maybe Nick could tell us a little bit about what that feels like. What is it like, Nick?
Yeah, Nick,
living
what's
in a
it
world
like?
Of convenience.
Well, let's be honest. We're all striving for this in our cities, I think, is walkability. I'm blessed with being in a very walkable neighborhood in Vancouver. If you go on Walk Score, it's a 100, which is very nice. And yeah, I walk a lot. Like we talked about earlier in the show, it's not just my job. I walk a lot. I walk a lot outside of my job. We can walk to restaurants. I have a grocery store that's only a few blocks away. There's a convenience store across the street. There's everything, most things we need for our daily life are within a walking distance. And it's just so convenient. It's so nice to not have to think, oh, I got to drive, 15, 20, 30 minutes to the nearest Costco to pick up a load of groceries to last me a month. Any time of the day, I'm like, oh, we're out of whatever, rice vinegar. I'll be back in 5 minutes and go pick some up. It's not a big deal, which is really nice. And it's nicer to be able to buy just fresher stuff, right? And I know Costco's kind of memed for certain things, but they do have a lot of fresh stuff that you can buy from them. Although you might have to buy a lot of it.
Oh, absolutely.
In ages.
You know what? I'll say this right now. Living above that $1.50 hot dog deal or that $2 pizza combo is going to save people a lot of money. I'll just say that right there.
True.
The $3 chicken bit, or I think it might actually be $4 now, but yeah. It's still, it's not your typical grocery store, but regardless, I think people are still going to like it. Plus, Costco has a whole almost religious dedication of fans to the brand. So I think it's going to do pretty well for housing. I think that you're going to actually see some Costco aficionados actually move into this place.
Yeah. They carry a lot of staples, right? Eggs and bread and lots of fruits and veggies and stuff.
They carry all the staples, and then of course if you need like a $2,500 bouncy castle or I don't know, 250 pills of Tylenol, you can get that there too. 85-inch flat screen TV on top of getting 2 dozen eggs in bulk.
Yeah.
I will say the one thing that I do,
because I've been to the Costco that's in Richmond, BC, not too far from here. That's the only one I've been to. I've been there once, and it's just the typical Costco, crazy parking lot filled with cars, super busy. People are circling, not because they're looking for the best spot. They're just looking for a spot. It's insane. But there's actually one downtown right beside the Rogers arena where the Canucks play. And it gets packed with people before the games because they're going in for the hot dogs or the pizza or whatever. But I'm curious to know what their parking situation's like right downtown Vancouver. I haven't been there yet, but maybe I should go just to see. I'm curious because it's almost like this, right? It's just surrounded by residences, even if it's not built by Costco or the developer that they've had contracted. But anyway.
Yeah. And Jen in the chat says, pharmacy, food, clothing, why leave the area? Rock those Kirkland sweatpants. And I say, why not? Why not shop local, even if local means a Costco, I guess. Whatever is most convenient to you, right? Like that's the thing. That's what we're going for, is we want to be able to access these things. Jen also told me to just move to Bridgeland, which is where Jen lives. and live the dream. But I'll say I like my area. I like my neighborhood. I do think it would be nice to have a few extra conveniences, but I live not too far from a few grocery stores and a few other things that are pretty accessible to me. And we will get into a bit more of that conversation in a little bit here. But yeah, Ethan, final thoughts on your dream home above a Costco.
That's right. That is my dream home, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out, Alex. I don't think I made that clear enough. But no, developments like this are going to be key in getting actual affordable housing out there and getting actual mixed-use zoning into cities. I hope that this goes really well for Costco, and I hope other brands and other developers see this success and decide to capture it.
Yeah, and we do... Yeah, we've got some of this stuff happening in Calgary. Calgary Co-op is building a bunch of housing on top of their new grocery stores. They're doing some cool stuff. So it's good to see, and it's good to see that more of this stuff is happening, because really the grocery store, like that's like the place that you need to go to every single week. Like everybody needs to go to the grocery store. So yeah, if you're in the grocery business, why not put houses right above? And well, I'm the obvious choice. There's an elevator right into the lobby. So yeah, I dig it. Nick, do you want to take us away with this next story?
Yeah, this is some bad news that comes from a couple weeks ago, and a driver was caught going nearly triple the speed limit through a Vancouver school zone. So Vancouver police caught a driver just outside of an elementary school going 70 kilometers per hour over the posted speed limit of 40. That's right. The driver was going 112 in a school zone, which is a far cry from the Lamborghini that was going 167 kilometers per hour in the same area last year. But I want to ask you two guys, and maybe in the chat, go ahead. How much do you think this driver was fined? What was the punishment for this crime of going over 70 kilometers per hour over the speed limit in a school zone?
$150 Canadian.
Well, I know, in Alberta, that would get your license taken away for sure, and the fine I think would be somewhere around $400.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
I think
that's pretty close. It was $368 for the ticket, and his car was impounded, and that's the punishment for this, which just to me seems crazy. It seems crazy in the first place. Like we talk about design speed, right, on this show a lot. And in this circle is about designing your streets to encourage people to go to the speed limit or the speed that you want them to go at, the design speed. It's something we don't do, right? But like the design speed of these streets isn't 112. This is like gross negligence. This is reckless endangerment. And I'm just like, how is that the only fine? Like at least you should have your driver's license suspended for some portion of time. And I know that's not going to stop people from driving who are willing to break the law in that degree, but then, getting caught another time is where you can escalate things to actual jail time, because this is criminal. This is insane. Like a woman was just killed a few weeks ago in West Vancouver, and the driver got a fine of like $400 or something, and that's it. It's just...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to... Sorry to cut you off, Nick. I was just going to say, we talk a lot about carrots and sticks on this show, and this is where we should really be breaking out the sticks here, folks. We should not be giving people a pat on the back for going 70 kilometers, 100 kilometers over the speed limit. We should be absolutely be sure that people are understanding the consequences of their actions here. Yeah, and I don't think money's going to do that.
No. That's obviously going to depend on who's getting that ticket too. Like it could be somebody who can't afford it. It's not going to be a large deterrent in the moment. Like you don't think about that when you're driving. But what really shocked me was that this was defined as going 41 kilometers too fast. Like as if going 30 over the limit in a 40 zone, in a school zone, is not worthy of some kind of fine or forfeiture or something. That's just crazy to me that there's a leeway of 30 kilometers per hour over the speed limit in a school zone. It's really sad. But yeah, first off, we need to change our streets so that this isn't happening. It's not even possible. I talked about this when I was driving the Netherlands. Like in Rotterdam, the speed limit on a street was 50, and I was like, I'm not going faster than 50. It just felt criminal. Like not criminal. Like you'd probably hit something. Like windy, tiny roads. Like it's not going to happen. It's crazy. But and another thing is that we're relying on the police to come around a few times a year on a stretch of road for some enforcement to scare people on social media. Look, what we might get a ticket. Like, it's so lacking. It's unbelievable. What do you think, Alex?
Oh, I think a lot of things about this. I mean, first of all, this isn't just even like some regular street where somebody decided to pull a stunt. This is a school zone where this is somewhere where you expect there to be a higher chance of children in the area who, by the way, are less likely to be as cautious and capable and paying as much of attention as an adult. And on top of that, because of the size of our vehicles and the design of our streets, it makes it hard to see children, right? So like you're making the conscious decision to speed in a place where you know there's likely to be kids and that it might be hard to see them because we have cars allowed, well, not allowed, but physically parked up to the curbs, right? Up to the intersections, rather than having curb extensions to prevent that. We have big vehicles, which are easy for kids to hide behind, and adults. My cousin has a truck that the hood is as tall as my head, right? Like we have these big things that make our streets more dangerous, and then to choose to drive this fast is just absolutely reckless. And that's a conscious decision. This isn't like, oh, I was having fun. Oh, I wasn't paying attention to the speedometer. I made the conscious decision to do something incredibly dangerous and very obviously dangerous. Like, and then I get slapped with a fine and my car gets impounded, but like I can move on with my life.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I'll get it back in 5 days.
Yeah.
It sucks, but hey, I'll survive. When these things do lead to tragedy, as predictable as they can be, they're not accidents. When somebody's speeding in a school zone, any zone in the city, that's another little gripe I have. We need to take extra care when it comes to children, largely because they're smaller, right, and they're just harder to see. But it's also strange to me that there'll be like a neighborhood street where there's a school and there's a school zone sign from this time to this time, like 40 kilometers between whatever school hours on school days. It's like, why isn't it just 30 kilometers per hour all the time? It's a neighborhood street. Why does it have to be faster when there's not kids? As if there's not going to be kids around anyway. It's like as if kids don't exist unless there's a school nearby. And it's just a whole thing about making our streets safer so that people can feel free to go around. And preaching to the choir here, but holy hell, I'm just like, I'm fired up, guys.
No, I get that. And on top of that, too, is that a lot of the times after these kind of tragic accidents occur, you'll often see people just say straight up, like, oh, we need to make drivers more aware. And you're like, how? And they're like, we need to get them off their phones. And you're like, oh, you're so close. You're so close, because it's not just distracted driving that's doing this. It's our streets. It's our street design that leads to that level of distraction. Drivers feel so comfortable on roads like this that they think that they can get away with checking their phone because the road lanes are wide. There's no chicanes, there's no speed bumps to deal with. There's nothing along those lines that's going to make you say, hey, I should slow down for my safety and actually go under the speed limit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I'm kind of crazy about. I've talked about it on this show. I've talked about it on other shows now, is that we need to design our local streets better. And a lot of these are local streets where there may be a school on it, but that doesn't mean, like, at any time of the day it should be any faster than something like 30, 40, but like even 30. Why not 30? It just seems crazy to me. We need to change our streets so they're safer everywhere, not just on bike routes, not just beside schools. Every local street should be safe for people to go along on a bicycle, to walk over and not have to fear from a car going that fast. It's just crazy. Yeah. Jen says 40 kilometers per hour is a political move. Absolutely. It's a shitty compromise for no reason. You're not getting anywhere faster.
Yeah, who was I talking to? I was talking to a bike advocate here in Calgary yesterday, and I was asking him, hey, what do you think of this? And trying to get some feedback on some of the things that the city of Calgary is working on. And something he recommended is starting at the schools for these things, for raised crosswalks, for bike lanes, for wider sidewalks, for curb extensions, all of these things, because that's the area where the most vulnerable population will be congregated the most likely, right? Every kid ends up using like one of 3 crosswalks to get to the school, right? And so if you start at the school and can radiate out there with your improvements, right, that's where you're going to have the biggest effect and the biggest impact on safety and preventing these things. Because it's not a matter of if there's going to be a fatal collision, it's when. If we build our streets like this, it's not some shot in the dark. It's not mysterious. It's not uncertain. Like, we can tell because we know how we're doing this stuff because we see it again and again and again. And then something happens at a street corner. There's a street corner by my place, about a 5-minute walk from my front door, where somebody was killed a few years ago, crossing the street. And from my house, I could probably get to 5 or 6 schools within a 10-minute walk. There's tons of schools in my area. And so there's a lot of young people walking around the area. There's a couple places where there's a lot more elderly people living. These homes, because they're older, there's a lot of elderly people living here. We have a lot of more like vulnerable populations and more risk-averse populations living in my area. And then we wait until somebody dies crossing the street, and then we put out the yellow temporary, curb extensions, right, before they come in and ultimately replace those, 10, 15 years later. But why do we wait? Why do we wait till something like that happens? And then I know the people from the community association here had been talking to the city for a long time, fighting for this stuff to get put in because people speed through those areas and there's schools on that street. And then somebody dies and the city says, oh shit, maybe we should do something. And then they do something, but it's too late. That person's already gone. And if we had traffic calming measures and we had lower speeds on streets and we had the streets designed for those lower speeds, and you were told, hey, listen, we're thinking about taking out this curb extension and taking out this crosswalk, this raised crosswalk, and kind of widening the road a little bit, widening the lanes so that you can get through here 20 kilometers per hour faster. You're going to, instead of moving through this area at 30 kilometers an hour, you're going to move through at 50 kilometers an hour. We're going to put a fence around the school field so that it's less permeable for the kids, but you'll be able to improve your commute. Oh, and also, one kid from one of the schools in the area, one neighborhood kid, is going to die every year. But your commute will be faster. You would never go for that. Nobody would ever go for that. Ever. And so then why do we have to fight for our streets to be safer? Why do we have to argue with the city for our streets to be safer? Why can we not be proactive and say, hey, listen, I've noticed, based on the research that we've done over decades and decades in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in North America, in Asia, in Europe, right? Why don't we just make those improvements? Why don't we just make the decision to make our streets safer for our kids, for our grandparents, for ourselves, right? Because we're not indestructible either, right? We might be less risk averse, but a car is going to have the same impact on me as it does a high school kid, right?
Yeah.
My bones aren't wizard strong compared to them, right?
Yeah, not Gandalf strong yet.
No, you're not. You're not going to be able to take a car on.
No,
you're not an X-Men. There's no adamantium skeleton you got going on there, Alex.
I'm
something you're
on
not
the
telling
science
us.
of that. Yeah, well, you might. I might look different a year from now. I'll have some cool metal claws or something. But no, but seriously, why do we wait? Why do we wait till something happens and then we put in the kind of temporary measures? But I have more to say about this when we get to my thing. So, well, let's keep going on this story, Nick.
Well, just like you were saying, right? We need to be taking this seriously. And first of all, be preventative, like you're saying, but also when it does happen, not just be a reactionary thing for that specific place, but it's a way for us to learn and see what's wrong with this and which other places in our communities have the same problems and fix those as well. And I think a lot of it comes down to, obviously, like we're talking about the design, but the engineering standards that are in place, where there are people who work in engineering, and I've talked to people on either side of it, people who go to work and they do their job and they're not passionate about it. They follow the book, they have to do this job, they make it work, and then they go home, and that's it. And that's all they're required to do. But I also hear from other engineers who are very passionate about this stuff. They're into urbanism. They want their city to be safer, giving suggestions to change the guidelines, and it's being ignored. And that is really disheartening. But I think that's something we're going to touch on in the future for a bonus episode, because I think we're going to talk to an engineer about this stuff. And I think it's very important that we start to dig into this and realize that how much of our built environment is truly affecting the way we move around and how deadly it is.
Yeah. And the bottom line, too, is our built environment was built by somebody, right? Like, people made choices to build things like this.
Yeah.
And we have better information now, and we can make choices now to build things differently. It was all built by somebody. It can all be rebuilt by somebody. It can be changed by somebody. Every time you see a new crosswalk get put in, right? Every time you see the curb cuts get put in, or the tactile strips at a crosswalk get put in, those are all decisions that are made. And I think it's really important to be involved in that engagement process, which kind of brings us, I don't have a story today, but I do have a topic that I wanted to talk with you guys, and that is the city engagement process. Now, the city of Calgary gets a lot of engagement from people. I brought this up earlier in the show, right? The provincial and federal governments tend to just go ahead and do things. The city of Calgary tries to really engage with people, because the bottom line is your municipal government, it impacts you every single day. And you interact with the sidewalks, the roads, the sewage, the electricity, all of those utilities, the transit. You interact with these things every single day. And so getting input from the public is a hugely important part of this governing and democratic process. And lately in my area, I'm going to share my screen here, there has been an engagement going on for this route here. They're going, kind of the main thing that's being talked about is putting a bike lane in here, but it's also about just general street improvements. And so I wanted to bring this up with you guys. I went to an engagement the other night. I was invited by Bike Calgary to go to this, but I went to it as an individual who lives down the street here and who uses or crosses this right of way every single day. I use this road. And so, a few other people, some community association members were there, other people, and we were talking about the different ways that we can improve this. And you can see on the online engagement portal, you're able to put in a marker and kind of identify different things. So here we have a bicycle, and somebody said improved bike lane and or bike barriers along Acadia Drive would improve safety through the community and improve access to pathways along the Bow River throughout Fish Creek Park. And so we see some really great things here, and you can see different areas where people make the most comments. Obviously, this is a major intersection. This is a major intersection, right? And it's great to see so many people engaged in this process. And I just wanted to bring this up and get your guys' feedback on, like, how do you participate in the engagement process in your cities? What is it like? Are you optimistic about the way that you're being engaged? I'm curious, and I'd also like the people we have in the chat to chime in as well and see what your guys' thoughts are.
Well, in Vancouver, usually it's like a survey. It's not something interactive like that. Having a map where you can place concerns on the map is very interesting. And I think it depends on how many people are going to be using it for collecting data, because that could be kind of difficult. But that is really cool. That is a very unique way to do it, where you can actually highlight certain areas where people have local knowledge and they can share that knowledge, or at least have suggestions in those areas. But yeah, we in Vancouver, a lot of the times it's a survey, and often it feels as though there's like an ulterior motive when it's put out. Like, I remember there was one about noise in the city, and there was nothing about, car noise or anything like that, or the way it affects people, or should the city be quieter. It just seemed like a way for the city to justify extending the hours for business so that they could make noise later, or construction and stuff like that, without being clear about it. And I feel like it'd be nicer if just we could be more upfront about what we're trying to talk about, what we're going to try to change in our city. Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't love it here.
Trust me, it's kind of the same here in Las Vegas, or at least the suburb I live in, Henderson. A lot of our responses go through on surveys, and yeah, there is kind of a feeling of ulterior motives and a vagueness to the surveys, where you really just kind of feel like the questions are kind of fishing for the answers that they want, rather than actually getting some legitimate public input that would actually be helpful.
That's interesting to me. I have gotten a sense from the conversations that I've had with people in other cities that the city of Calgary actually does a lot of engagement. And this is phase one of this project, of this engagement project, where they're basically just collecting data. Like, they're just asking people in the neighborhood, what do you experience? How do you experience this space? And finding out from people what their concerns are, what their ideas are. And it was really great at the in-person engagement, because they are making a little bit more effort to engage with specific groups rather than just having an open house where everybody comes in. They can kind of say, like, well, let's make sure we talk to the community association, and let's make sure we talk to the advocacy organizations. There was a representative from the schools at the event that I went to 2 nights ago, and it was really great to see the way that the staff interacted with the people from the organizations, literally just asking questions like, hey, how do you experience this space? Because a lot of the staff, they've never used this space, right? And so it's nice to see that it's not just engineers kind of peering down and saying, like, this will be our great master plan. It's people who live here, people who walk their kids to school here, or ride their bikes with their kids to school here, saying, hey, you know what? I actually have a big problem with this specific thing. Are we able to do something about this? And the planners are able to say, yeah, like, it's your street, it's your neighborhood. And so it makes me optimistic about the ownership that we're able to take over these things. Jen in the chat says, I try to use 311 when I notice things. I've also filled out some city prompted surveys as well. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, Skitch says, it's fascinating that after 6 years of planning school, I never had a class that focused on what types of engagement members of the public find most useful to advocate for themselves and their community. It would have been really cool to do a project about this and reach out to local advocates. That is, like, actually a really interesting thought. I should talk to some of the friends I have at the university and see if we have classes about that. Because I think it's a little bit of a newer thing, that level of community input. Yeah, do you guys have an idea of how you would like your city engagement to change? Like, what would you do, like, if you were given the reins?
Like, maybe listen. That's what I feel like right now, at least, is that we're not heard. Like, we're going to city hall meetings when there's something they're trying to change, and the vast majority of people calling in, we're talking 95+%, are in support or in opposition of what's being proposed, and the opposite happens 9 times out of 10. And it's like, are these people not being listened to at all? These decisions are made up before anybody even comes to talk. We're just here as a formality. What's the fucking point? And that's really frustrating, because it feels like we're not being listened to. But again, this could just be my myopic view.
Yeah.
I have a kind of in the same boat where I feel like the people are not being listened to, but I also feel like it comes from the fact that a lot of people don't know about this kind of civic activism as well. The people who should be speaking, or people's voices who should be heard, are often kept in the dark just due to the fact that a lot of these community output or community engagement meetings, especially in person, are usually during hours when people are working or taking care of families, because not everybody has time for civic engagement. The people who can usually do this level of civic engagement usually end up being wealthier and, gotta be honest, whiter. That's wealthier, whiter, and older, and that's usually who goes out to any sort of civic engagement meetings in person. And just getting a more diverse understanding of what our community needs when it comes down to civic engagement is something that I know a lot of cities have really at least been saying that they're trying to strive for, but truly haven't actually reached out to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a really important point, and something that came up a lot while we were doing a lot of housing advocacy work in Calgary, especially earlier this year, was that the people who would benefit most from these ideas that we're discussing and that we're talking about are too busy looking for housing to come to City Hall and advocate for it for themselves, because it's a full-time job. When you're struggling to make ends meet, when you're struggling to get housing, that it's a full-time job. You don't have time to show up at City Hall and try and make political change. And that goes for a lot of these things. You know, the room that I was in, the people who were there, and obviously this was a smaller engagement, but any of the engagements that I've gone to, they are very they're very inaccessible to the broad population, and I do think that that's something we can and do and should be working on. I wanted to highlight Austin's comment in the chat here. He says, in my urban studies degree, one of the city planning classes, the transit city one, I think, had a large emphasis on public engagement. So that's great to hear that those conversations are happening, and the way that we engage. And so I'm always happy to see the way that the city of Calgary improves their engagements each time. I've felt similarly to the way that you guys have felt, where it kind of feels railroaded a little bit, like they're going for a specific answer. But it seems that with each engagement, they're kind of like, okay, we're trying something new. We want to hear a little bit more, like, what does this look like? And so I'm glad that they're ready to have those conversations and innovate.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's like playing D&D with a bad DM sometimes, right? They're just not giving you what you want, but then again, sometimes that's not what you need.
Yeah, it is interesting. But maybe let's move on. Should we get into some listener mail?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's let Nick read.
Sure.
This one.
This is from Jen Hall, friend of the show. What piece of urban infrastructure from around the world isn't in your city and you would love to see? So this is, I'll go first. Why not? This is something I think most people in North America would love to have. And this is definitely a secure bicycle parking facility, or many of them, especially at transit stops. I know we have a few of them in Vancouver, but nothing even close to what I think is appropriate, because these things are incredible. And I'm talking about the ones that you get to see in the Netherlands, like the biggest one in the world in Utrecht at the central train station. Wild. It's like 12,500 bicycles in this one parking garage, and there's security there. And that's what people need, right? That's one of the biggest complaints about people when they say, oh, I can't ride a bicycle, or I don't want to ride one because I'm worried about my bicycle getting stolen. It's a completely legitimate concern, because bike theft's a real issue. And secure parking is a great way to thwart that.
I like it. Ethan.
Yeah, if we're going to go on just urban infrastructure that I would love to see that my city doesn't have, honestly, I could say the obvious answer and say a metro system, but I'm going to be a little bit more fun here. The simple response here is I'd like to see more protected Dutch-style bike intersections. They're the easiest way to make an intersection, which is the most dangerous point for any cyclist, a million times safer for riding. So literally just 4 little pieces of concrete in an intersection for bike lanes just to make them safer. If we were to cover the entire Las Vegas Valley with these every intersection, I can guarantee you cycling would be significantly safer and ridership for cyclists would go up.
Yeah. It's interesting. You guys both mentioned something for cycling, and I'm going to mention something for cycling as well, actually, but a little bit different. This one, I want a docked e-bike share in Calgary. We have e-bikes, but they're dockless. We also have e-scooters, but they're dockless. And it drives me insane, and it drives everybody else in the city insane as well. I'm very supportive of these micromobility solutions. I love those things. I mean, I talk about it on a podcast every week, but it is very, very frustrating to be walking down the street and there's an e-bike in your way. And for me, it's easy enough for me to move, but for other people, it can be more challenging. Whether it's just the weight of an e-bike, or maybe they're using a wheelchair or a walker, it can complicate their mobility, right? Which is really frustrating when you're trying to use this tool to get other people mobility options and mobility freedom, and then it ends up inadvertently affecting other people's ability to get around the city. That's frustrating. So yeah, I think e-bikes are a big one. Docked e-bike share. Austin says, I'd love a docked e-bike system too, with bucket cargo bikes at some of them. That could be pretty cool. Although I do feel like the bucket cargo bikes, you end up carrying so much and need to go home, and then you have to ride it back to the spot. I don't know. It could work. I'm not gonna kibosh your idea. That's something we can
but
do.
Something that's also nice about docked e-bikes is that it's predictable. Like, you know where it's going to be. You know where that particular station is that you use often, because it is frustrating trying to find a scooter or a bike that's dockless. On top of the issues that you mentioned. Yeah,
you end up wandering around.
On top of this too, it's just a lot of these places do need more stations as well too, where they exist, the docked stations. Because a lot of the times you're looking for a station, you just cannot find one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't use existing routes in the cities. Just a little example here. When I was in Chicago, I couldn't use certain e-bikes, and I couldn't use e-bikes or e-scooters on the lakefront trail there, which is a huge bike commuter space.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I do wonder how the decision is made where to put one, right? Like, where to put one, how big is it going to be? I'd be interested to do kind of like a broad study across cities around the world and see how those decisions are made and how things end up being the most effective. I like this. I've enjoyed this conversation. I know we've had some really disappointing stories today, some really frustrating and honestly heartbreaking stories today. But I like to think that we've had a productive conversation. Too. Nick, you've got one last thing to share.
Just in time for that, I get to bitch about something else.
It's love it.
Time for a Wug Mug, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long time. Woo! Let me tell you. And it's about parking. Holy shit. I'm fucking sick and tired of seeing people take advantage of the shitty parking situation in every city I go to. And I'm not just talking about the regular people, abusing parking meters, going places and parking where they shouldn't be parked. It's specifically about people who work for the city and the police parking where they shouldn't be parked because, I'm exempt. I can park here. And this is coming in places where you think, hey, maybe there's a reason why you're not supposed to park there. And I'm not talking about in emergency situations. We're not talking about an ambulance who's parked in front of a fire hydrant or something like that. We're talking about when you see, I saw this the other week, a city vehicle parked on top of a crosswalk outside of a school. And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't park there. There's a lot of other spaces there. You see this was with police officers too, parking right up to the curb. What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? There's a reason why those laws are in place. You can park somewhere else. It's not as if oh, you're a police officer. You can park there, and all of a sudden, it's safe. It's not as if these cars can see through you now that you're police and that there's a kid about to cross the street. It's ridiculous. And I have something to share here. This is coming from New York City, which, let me tell you, you think I can get fired up about parking. Just go talk to people in New York City, and they'll tell you how bad it is, especially with the police. And this is outside of a police precinct along a sidewalk. Holy shit. And for the people listening, there's somebody walking in between the cars. There's like as little as 6 inches between this wall and these cars parked outside of this police station. It's crazy to think about the just lawlessness that is around this subject of parking. And this is not even getting to the whole thing about who's paying for parking and how much we're spending on other people parking their cars or just empty space that we're wasting and all the other downsides and externalities that come with parking. It's just crazy to me that just the city and the police force are so emboldened that they feel like they can park wherever they want. It really grinds my gears. I got to tell you guys.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll just to add to it here too. There are solutions to these things.
Tell me.
There are solutions. Bike lanes. They're protected bike lanes, right? Rather than
Bollards.
just paint. Bollards. You can put those like curbs that you find in the parking lot. You can put those up so that cars can't back right over the sidewalk. There are like solutions that you can do instead of just like you put up a sign on a street corner. You say, "Hey, no parking within 5 meters of the intersection."
At least
are people getting out of their car and like, let me check, let me double check if am I parked far enough back? No, like they're able to park right up there, and nobody's coming along to tell them not to, right? But of course, this is a hazard.
Yeah.
You don't do that to the police in the U.S.
Yeah.
You're just asking for trouble at that point. But I did see a comment on that Reddit post that you shared there with the video, and it did say apparently that precinct was being sued by somebody.
Oh, really?
About this parking situation.
Wow.
Yeah, so hopefully that lawsuit scares them off the sidewalks, but if it's
we'll
happening.
see.
Yeah.
But that's insane by any standards to be parking that brutally. I know that cops are known for parking in quite possibly the worst situations possible.
Yeah.
But this is pretty insane, even by staying at a precinct.
Do you know what sidewalks get parked on a lot?
Tell me.
British sidewalks.
Oh my God. What do they call them? They don't call them sidewalks. Pavement?
Pavement.
The pavement, yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You go to like the UK subreddit, let me tell you, half of it's just people posting cars parked on the pavement. It's wild.
Yeah.
But
it is crazy.
something you mentioned already was curb extensions. And this is something that I feel like, as we talked about earlier about changing your design, is every time you redo a street, why aren't you adding curb extensions at the crosswalk? I had a video today where there was a construction vehicle parked with its nose into the intersection, past the stop sign, just waiting there. And I'm like, I took a video of it. I'm like, why are you here? Like, there's room everywhere to park. I went and slowly walked around the vehicle and looked as a truck came zooming past, like, because they can't even see the stop sign. There's a truck there. If you put curb extensions there, it prevents people from parking up to the curb, and you don't even need signage a lot of the cases. Yeah. Because like there's a school near where I live, and during the school year, they put out these custom signs out to say, please don't park within 6 meters of the curb or the sidewalk. Like, why is that necessary? It's because the city is foregoing their responsibility. It's really frustrating. But that's all on top of the fact that just the disregard for the laws from the people who are supposed to be keeping it. It's just...
something you mentioned earlier about doing investigations into like solving the problems that we have. The cycling advocate that I was chatting with yesterday, or the bicycling advocate that I was chatting with yesterday, he used to work for an airline, and he was telling me about when something goes wrong on an airplane or at an airport, it is like investigated so hard. And he said, and it never stops at human error. It never stops at, well, it's human error. What were we supposed to do?
Yeah.
It stops at, all right, what are we going to do now? Because obviously somebody made a mistake, right? Somebody dropped the ball somewhere around here, right? How do we make sure that doesn't happen again? Airlines have checklists. Airlines have safety protocol. Airlines are constantly adapting every single time something goes wrong. And it's made air travel one of the safest ways to get around. because they take it seriously, and we need to do the same thing on our streets. One thing that I just developed an opinion on yesterday was bus stop placement. There are a lot of bus stops placed right at the curb, right at the intersection, and it creates a visibility issue. If somebody is crossing and there's a bus stopped right there, somebody coming through and making a turn has a harder time seeing the pedestrian, seeing the person crossing, and so that's something I think we need to be more considerate about, where we're putting parking, where we're putting bus stops, where we're putting signs, where we're like all of this stuff, all of these decisions, and they're all things that we can control. So so speak up, put in a 311 request, put in multiple 311 requests, get other people to put in those requests, show up to city engagements, make friends with planners, take them for drinks and tell them like, hey, this is something I'm dealing with. What are my options? Because they're in the system, they're working with the system, right? Like actually just talk to them and be like, how does this work? So, this was a good show. I feel good about this. Thanks for joining us, Nathan, and everybody in the chat. This was good. Ethan, do you want to take us away?
Absolutely, folks. Thank you so much for watching this show. We really appreciate it. And if you want to join our lovely live viewers, just like they've been here, Skitch, Austin, Jen Hall, and maybe another tab of Austin in Firefox instead of Chrome. But if you want to join these lovely people in watching the show live on Wednesdays, check out our Patreon. It starts at just $1 a month. But anyways, after that nice little yap session about our Patreon, Nick, where can the good people find you?
Oh, you know where you can find me. Find me at Nick the Door on most social media platforms, including YouTube, Threads, and Instagram. How about you, Alex? Where can the good people find you? The good people.
The good people, the feetful. The feetful can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Humane Cities, and Instagram and Threads at Alex Williams YY3 YYC. I'm doing more stuff-ish in those places. On my regular human account rather than just my Humane Cities account. So stay tuned there or something.
We're still waiting for a new video.
We're still waiting.
Hey, you know what? I was gonna film one today. Okay, I'm planning on it. I have something.
Just one more day, guys. Just one more day.
I promise. There will be a new video coming. And I also just before I pass it off to Ethan for our final rap-de-doo, I want to share something that our good pal friend Jen Hall said. One of the fellow feetful here at Radio Free Urbanism, former co-host, friend of the show, Jen Hall. Jen said, "I give up. I'm going online and buying a wardrobe made exclusively of high-vis material." And I just thought that was great. And I'll highlight Austin. He said, I have concepts of a plan. Alex, thanks, Austin. Yeah, I have concepts of multiple videos that I'm working on. I promise. Anyways,
like his videos are only 3 words long, like "walk cities walk."
That's what I'm gonna start posting now. Yeah, Humane Cities Transformation 2025. You won't see it coming. Anyways, Ethan, take us away.
Folks, thank you so much for watching this video, and if you want to find me anywhere on social media, it's at Climate in Transit. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, train good, car bad.
2 wheels good.
And feet first.